Hi, Hunter. I'm not gonna lie, I'm freaking tired. I'm good.
Okay, let's claim it. Let's own it.
Ah,
Let's see where we're at. Where are you
It's
calling
a
in from?
good from Sweden, from a town that
From
I cannot even pronounce in
You're in
Sweden.
Sweden right now, Shiva?
I'm in
What time
Sweden.
is it?
Yeah. It's not that late. It's 7 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay. So
Yeah.
why are you tired? What kept you up?
I've been here for a 3-day leadership executive education program with a Swedish company. Um,
Okay.
and it's pretty cool that we're having this talk today because this whole program that I did was designed, um, grounded in two specific, like the work of two specific people who are from the global majority.
Mm, mm. Awesome. Awesome.
So I'm speaking to you from a day of actually trying to do what we're about to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. You're in the zone, as
I'm
tired as
in
you
the
may
zone.
be.
Yes.
So I read a bit about your bio there. Is there anything else you'd like to share? How you got to this point, and made this your focus, your passion, your mission?
Mm, sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm losing my voice. I'm gonna be drinking
Oh,
a
you're
lot of water.
fine. I'm a
Yeah.
multi-beverage millennial, so you're fine. You
Yes.
take as many sips as you need. Self-care is important.
Thank you.
Hmm.
So how did I get, it's been a journey. Let's see if I can condense it, which I am not very good at, to be perfectly honest, at condensing things. Um, but it started when the first kind of topic I engaged in leadership development was cultural intelligence. So I was a facilitator before then. And I came across this thing of cultural intelligence, of how to like understanding different cultures and how they function, the value sets, how that transfers into behaviors, etc. And I always just kind of felt icky because all
Mm,
the leaders and the research in that field that we use, they're all Western based, right? So when I say
hmm
global minority and global minority, I mean Eurocentric, right? Folks who come from Europe or ancestors are from Europe, and global majority is the rest of the world, right? It's
hmm
Central and South America, it is Africa, it's all across Asia. So all of that stuff in cultural intelligence came from research from people of the global minority. And I was like, you're writing about my culture, but you don't get you think you get my culture, but you don't get
mm,
my culture. And it's pretty clear from what you're writing, you don't get my culture. But at the same time, I was like, I was doubting myself, but obviously, I mean, they've got doctorates in this, they've got much more experience, they've worked in all these
mm,
amazing corporate environments, they must know more than I do, right? So I just kind of hushed up that little voice inside of me.
mm,
And as I started to teach that, I started to teach that to, I regret having taught that, to be honest, but as I started to teach
mm,
that to diverse groups, I started to realize the global majority folks were trying to present themselves as being aligned with the value sets and behaviors of the global minorities. So to give you an idea, these things are presented in cultural intelligence as direct or indirect communication, as collectivist or individualist, as trust from the head or trust from the heart, right? So it's always presented as binary. That's the first part. And I noticed that my colleagues from across Asia, for example, were like, I am from Iran or I am from India, but I'm actually much more direct in my communication, or I'm much more
mm,
of an individualist. And that was kind of like, that was just like the final straw for me of like, we're kind of indirectly telling people that global minority ways of being are better, right? And that is what we should be aspiring to. And then as I got more and more into leadership development in general, so cultural intelligence is just one aspect of it, communication, trust, strategic leadership, all these things come in to leadership. Um, I realized more and more just how every single one of the models that we use come from the global minority. Every single one. And we use them in global programs, right? And what we're doing when we're doing that is just saying, this is the only way to be.
hmm
It is cultural imperialism. We are enforcing, we are pushing one way and one value set onto the world. And so I think that was the path. So it started off with the cultural intelligence and just realizing this does not seem, skills off. and then starting to
Right.
notice the same things once I got into leadership development.
Yeah. Earlier today, we were talking about intuition, listening to your gut, and you described this ick feeling, right? And we also talked about imposter syndrome today earlier, and you described, oh, they have a degree, they must know more than me, right? So there's some things you're tapping into, themes of the day, Shiva. And I love hearing that journey of yours. Thank you so much. I appreciate that the length of it. I thought it was the perfect length.
I tried. I tried.
That was good. It was great. It was the story that Goldilocks chose. It wasn't too long, it wasn't too short. It was just right,
Just
Shiva.
right.
That's right. So now that and I love too that you're distinguishing, this the these Western ideas, imperialism on a global thought pattern, right?
Mhm.
These these bardos that we're all like trapped in, right? That like, why did we all sign up for this unconsciously? A lot of us, right? Because we don't know of the other options. So I love that you're now part of your journey is to decolonize all of this educational, let's say, one point of view. I like to call them limitations, perhaps, but that's a matter of opinion. How do we empower the global majority, these communities that you said that are the majority of the planet, not this minority that has dictated the way we think? How do we empower the global majority to reclaim and share the unique leadership perspectives that's just dominated by these Eurocentric paradigms?
I mean, well, step one is accepting that our ways are just as valid,
Mm,
right? Like I fell into that trap of, gosh, these people must know more than I do, right? And part of that is also because being West Asian, so being Iranian, being Muslim, raised in the West, like our identities were made to feel inferior and less than, and not enough by others, right? But we don't need to do that to ourselves either at the same time,
right.
right? So number one, accepting that our
Yeah, there's
culture,
enough people trying to do that to us. We don't need to
exactly,
do it to ourselves.
exactly. So accept first that our ways are just as valid, right? They're
Right.
just as good. And people shit on our cultures all the time. So we end up internalizing that. So that's the
Mm-hmm.
first battle, like overcoming that internalized racism, or isms in general that we have towards our own cultures and be like, nope, we got some good stuff too. Like I think of my Iranian background and I'm like, yo, we were an empire for freaking millennia. Like we've been around, right? And in that time, we've obviously learned some things that function in terms of leadership. We've also learned some things that do not function in terms of leadership, right?
Mm,
So step one is just accepting that we are valid. Then get curious. So there is research out there. There are books out there. Unfortunately, a lot of it is for the diaspora. For those of us who are outside of our ancestral lands, a lot of that information is not in English, which makes it less accessible for those of us in the diaspora. But we can still at least, if you read your native language, that's a lot easier. Just research, freaking research, right? Who are the people who are doing leadership research within your native lands? Find those people. They do exist, right? So do not wait for somebody else to do this. It is on us to bring this to the world. Step one. If, like me, you are illiterate, which is a hard thing to admit, I'm illiterate in my native language, then what has worked for me is a couple of things. One, looking back at the leaders who were in my ancestral communities growing up and who are still leaders in my ancestral communities now, and just noticing what are the patterns, like what are the ways of leading that I've seen that are healthy? How do we deal with conflict when it arises? How do we deal with negotiating? How do we mobilize people, right? And how do our communities tell stories and get people on board with things? Like we may not have the same language for it, but we all have the same concepts. They do exist. So notice how people did that. For example, I noticed that in the running community, we use a lot of metaphors, a lot.
mm,
And that's a practice I've started to use, metaphor and allegory, and bringing in all the time. I mean, today there was an entire building of freaking metaphors that I use, and it landed. It works, right?
Yeah.
So there is so much value in the stuff that our ancestors has done. So you have to look back and find the little breadcrumbs that they left you in terms of the messages that will bring you back to the ways and being of doing and seeing that our cultures are part of. Look at the literature that your culture constantly references. So again, an example from Iranian culture, Rumi and Hafez, the poets. So I will bring Rumi and Hafez into the training room. I will bring the wisdoms of them. And I'm trying to design entire leadership programs based on those wisdoms. They have been around for a long ass time. There's entire nations that rely on that for their wisdom, right? There's a reason for that. So find those sources, look for those behaviors, talk to your elders, right? And it's not easy, but like when I present stuff like this, people in the global minority, they love it, which I also find really interesting. People are thirsty. They're thirsty for knowledge that shows just a different way of being and thinking and doing.
I
So it's
love it.
beneficial both
Yeah.
ways.
It's refreshing, right? Because
Yes.
I think,
Yes.
I'm uh as white as milk. It goes back it's pretty pasty over here. Um I wear sunscreen in the winter. I'm so white. That's how white I am. And hearing the West, as a queer person, as a typical, non-binary queer person and neurodivergent, there's some of these systems don't really work for me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I hear about other ones, you really have my attention because as someone who's supposedly welcome here, I feel often unwelcome in many spaces in my own native land, and it's very uncomfortable. And it reminds me that this is, at a very early age, it seemed clear to me that this can't be the only way.
Mm-hmm.
Once I realized that I wasn't the problem, I was like, oh, this is not about me, but it's made about me, right? And I am always very attracted to anything that questions the norm here. Um, so I identify with what you're saying, as a person that grew up here, that's like, yes, please get the word out, please teach me so I can talk to other people about it too.
And
Please help.
happily.
Yeah.
And I'd also say like another thing that we can do is to stop freaking teaching the same. And excuse me, like this is super judgmental of me, but like the dumb ass models, like
Yeah.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like if you look up who
Mm,
Maslow was and like the questions around where his model actually came from and how he probably stole it from indigenous peoples, like it's sketchy. And you look at the Briggs-Myers assessment, like that there's some deeply racist roots in that shit. We need
mhm,
to, and I've yet to see folks in executive education actually questioning the models that we pull in.
mhm.
We just like copy and paste. Somebody in management consulting a few decades ago thought this is a great way to make money, and so they created a model from it, and then that's it. And
Yep.
you're like, something from 200 years ago, something from 50 years ago, even, is that really relevant right now? And look at the person who
Mhm.
created it and the biases that are embedded in the model itself.
Yeah. So I couldn't agree more. And so let's say, we're looking for new systems, right? And I'm someone that is, white as milk, looking for new systems. How can I incorporate these philosophies and methods respectfully without co-opting them or it being appropriation of another culture? It's a fine line, right?
It is a fine line. So I think in terms of like living your life according to the philosophies, first step is just making sure you understand them correctly, right? Or as correctly as can be, because I also understand that if you're not from a culture, it's very difficult to truly understand something from that culture, right? But do your research, right? And pay for that research, like buy the books, pay for the seminars or whatever. Hear it directly from the source. So if I want to learn more about Indigenous ways of being, I will find Indigenous sources to go to and learn from. But if I ever choose to verbally or write down the name of the model that I'm using or the philosophy, cite it and do not change it in any way, shape, or form. You see that happening a lot. People taking certain models or philosophies and then changing the wording around or changing the shape of things or changing the order of things.
And then they sell a book and make $1 million.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Hey,
Don't
capitalism, how you doing? Yeah.
So respect in the most basic form.
Yeah.
Cite it, don't change it. Don't download for free, buy the sources, and make sure you actually understand it.
Yeah, I love that. And I am also a big proponent of, yeah, pay the source. It's someone worked very hard. And maybe if they're dead and it's in the family estate, I will still give you the
Yeah,
money,
yeah, yeah. I mean, the program that I did today, it's grounded in the works of two folks. I'm trying to think, okay, I've already bought like as many books as I can from them, but how else can I give a portion of what I earn from this to them? And these are also like quite famous people in the global majority, but not that they need the money, but still, it doesn't matter. It's, or maybe I can write them personally and be like, hey, I want to give X% off of the work that the money that I earned off of your insights, off of your philosophies. And how do I give you that money? Or is there any kind of network or community you want me to pass that money on to?
I love
It's
that.
also sharing the wealth that you generate from the wisdom of other people,
Right.
especially from the global majority.
Yes, absolutely. Because money is energy too, right? And if we're like hoarding it, then it's just this stagnant, more is more is more. It's like, well, when is it enough then? And you
And then we're
need to
just
let it
taking,
out.
we're not giving back to the community that has allowed us to be able to make this money to begin with.
That's right. Yeah. So going back to that feeling of um you had that feeling of ick, right? When you were teaching and talking to people. So other people might be navigating something like that, right? If folks are reclaiming their ancestral leadership wisdom and they want to enrich the environments around them, how can they do that in a professional development practice while also staying true and honoring their own feelings? Because we don't want to just give this away on deaf ears, right?
Okay, so speaking specifically in terms of like my work is designing and delivering executive education programs for executive education schools. I'm trying to see if I understood the question. How do people like honor the ick feeling?
Well, how do people teach that without feeling icky, right? Like, where are you at now with being like, oh, I need to get this word out,
Okay.
but these people, I want them to know it, but do I want to teach them this?
Like, do I want to teach them the icky stuff?
No, do I want to teach them the wisdom that they're not aware of?
Oh, I see. Okay, got it.
I made you jump through like 3
Yeah.
hoops there. Thanks for going with me on my ADHD brain. I appreciate you.
No, that's fine because I'm there
For
with
my
you as
next trick, I'll juggle these 3 chainsaws.
well. I'm there with you as well. I'm also ADHD, and so my mind is like, but then this, and then this. Okay.
Right, right.
All right. So and which also means I've kind of forgotten the question already, but that's okay. I think I can grasp it.
Yeah,
I
just pick one of the 10 questions I just threw
God,
at you.
I do the same all the time. Like 10 questions in one. So I determined now to try to teach as much global or put in as much global majority wisdoms, perspectives, etc., as possible in the programs that I design, but especially the ones that I will be delivering. Right. I won't design a program of global majority wisdoms, et cetera, that includes all that if someone from the global minority will be delivering it. unless I can work with them directly for them to understand the importance and the value of it, to learn how to say, I don't know, I like to say, I don't know, if someone asks a deeper question instead of just pulling something out of their ass, right? So things like that. So I will make sure I always involve something of the global majority, and name it and cite it very clearly. And also tell folks in the trainings themselves of how to use it respectfully. Ha ha ha. I feel like there's still a question in your question that I did not answer, however. I don't know if I don't even know if you asked this one, but like a tip as well. People who work in learning and development, especially if you're trying to pitch an idea of a training. It like, again, the same thing as always, cite the sources that you're saying, but have the courage to pitch these new ideas. Because like you said, people are craving it. I mean, I spent the past year using these different things that I've brought in, like bringing in Rumi and Hafez, Adrienne Marie Brown, Bayaka Molafe, and people are like flipping out. They're like, holy shit, I never thought of it this way. That's a whole other way of approaching something. It's much more relational. It's much more human. And not just the participants who love it, but the program, like the client managers, like the ones who are running the account, who are responsible if this fucks up, they love it too. Everyone, I think, to be honest, I think, especially in Europe, North America, I'm not so sure, but especially in Europe, folks are they're also tired of US centric stuff. So they're ready. They're ready for something different.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. Well, hopefully we catch on over here and across the pond. Um, so let's talk about some of these teams maybe that you've watched transform with some of your guidance and working with them. What does it look like in practice? A technical role to leadership position, or pursuing an entrepreneurial venture with these new models.
That's a great question. What I see is folks who walk away from these kinds of models and this way of thinking, and it sounds cheesy, but like they really do think of people and planet first over profit. Because also another thing that's embedded into a lot of global majority philosophies is almost the rejection of capitalism as it is. It's like, and also the idea of making more money just for the sake of making more money. They start realizing an organization is an entity. It's not a person. It's a psychopathic entity as well. They realize our jobs are not saving lives, and they're not necessarily making the world any better. They're adding some luxuries and some things to help a little bit, but they're causing more harm than anything else. And it's interesting. So like they do walk away going, they start realizing how much power their organization has in the system of the world, and how it's not a healthy use of that power. Then they also start to realize how much power they have as a leader in an organization like that, and how much they might have been misusing it. And I realize that's a weird thing to walk out with, but I think it's also because a lot of global majority ways are very collectivist, and it's centered on the whole and that the interconnection of things, right? And in not just what's in it for me, but it has to be what's in it for all of us. So they do walk away better leaders in many ways, and also more somber, like actually respecting and understanding the power that they have and how that power needs to be used for the good of all.
Yeah.
And it does make them better leaders, to be perfectly honest. It genuinely does.
I imagine it also can facilitate a more empathetic leadership role, as if you're acknowledging and citing all of the things that you're operating from, there's humility there, because you're like, I didn't make this up. This is a guidepost that I'm doing my best to follow. And that's turning it over to the ancestors, right? To the people that set us up for success and acknowledging them. And that takes it off of me, right? It makes it less about me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in our last couple minutes here, it's not lost on me that you seem to have a very fitting name for what you do. So for our viewers who may not know about Shiva, would you mind maybe tying that bow together for us?
Yes, I can, but also note that so it's a name from the Hindu religion. I am not
Yeah,
Hindu.
yeah.
So it's of course it is my namesake. I was named after the Hindu god. Um and my understanding without being Hindu of Shiva is that it's the god of destruction and recreation.
Hmm.
And that is exactly what I try to do. Destroy the
Hmm.
paradigms that have oppressed us in many different ways so that we can
Yeah,
reconstruct healthier ones together.
right. And how beautiful that it actually is a name that isn't from your own
Yes.
heritage,
Yes.
and that's what you do. And I thought you just did that beautifully too. If you cited it, you own that. This is not from me. This is what I think it means. Like, what a beautiful example. Perfect. Thank you
That's
for
a good
teaching me
point.
how it's
Thank
done
you.
right there. Well, Shiva, this has been so wonderful. I'm glad we both had the sleepy giggles through this very intense conversation. I think it's important to bring some levity. The cosmic giggle keeps me alive. Thank you for igniting that in this conversation. It's just been such a delight. How can folks keep the conversation going with you and stay in touch?
Thank you, Hunter. And also thank you to Power to Fly. And this has been a delightful conversation. The best way is through LinkedIn. I am loud and proud on LinkedIn about decolonizing, and you can always send me a private message. I'm happy to chat, always happy for virtual conversations as well, for virtual chais.
Awesome. I'll be hitting you up, but get some sleep before you accept it, okay? Don't go on
I
LinkedIn
will.
now.
I
I mean, do
will.
whatever you want, but I wouldn't suggest it.
Thank you. I will.
Okay, good, good. Thank you so much for showing up despite all odds for your situation right now, being another time zone, coming off all the stuff, just being a powerhouse of a human being and being so generous with your time. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much. And good night.
Good night, my friend.